As an out lesbian, it's really terrific to be here with you all, to spend time with, what shall I say, with my people. And particularly when I think of my people, I think of you as activists in the progressive wing of the LGBT movement. And we can talk about the meaning of all that another time, but it's terrific to be here. It's also, as an anti-war organizer, I'm very happy to be here and terrifically moved by and proud of the leadership that U.S. Labor Against the War has given to this anti-war movement, and to the organizers of this conference for seeing how important this war is and the occupation in Iraq, and therefore cutting out the time during this weekend to have this panel and to ask us all to consider, what are we doing to end this war? How is the work that we're doing on all these other issues related to that struggle? So I want to thank U.S. Law, and I want to thank Pride at Work for all the work that you do. I don't know if people had a chance to see the newspaper this morning or catch CNN, but headline news. There is no connection between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda. Unbelievable. A Senate panel just announced this. Hello. This is a war. This is an occupation that never should have happened. It is a war that we said 4 years ago, as the Bush administration announced to the world that they were going to go into Iraq. People in this country working hand in hand with people all over the globe said, no, don't go to war. This war should not happen. You, George Bush, and your cronies are lying to the people of the world. In fact, all those lies have been exposed. There were no weapons of mass destruction. There never was a connection between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda. There was no threat from Iraq to us here in this country. There was no reason to go to war, except, of course, the real reasons to go to war, which had to do very simply with the empire building agenda of the Bush administration and their commitment to control the oil from Iraq and from the whole region. And we can never forget that. We can never forget the lies, and we can never forget the real reason why we went there in the first place and why we are still there. So this war, which of course was wrong from day one, is still wrong. And what do you do when you're doing something wrong? You end it. You stop doing it. You don't drag it out. You don't make it worse. You end it. It's really not rocket science. It's really not that complicated. Of course, we know this war is now 3.5 years old. We're 3.5 years into this, which is a little less than the amount of time the United States was involved in World War II. This is a long war for us. I mean, aside from Vietnam, this is a long war for us. The Civil War was a little less than 4 years. Right? So we have to think about, what does it mean that this administration, with the help of the United States Congress, with the help of people from both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, have committed our people power and our full economy into this kind of effort, again, a war that never should have happened. I don't need to go over all the horror of this war. Obviously, we just heard directly from an Iraqi voice about what goes on every single day to the people of Iraq. And of course, let us not forget the almost 2,700 now, I forget the exact number today, of U.S. service people, mostly young people, who have died in this war. Again, this war that never should have happened. And the tens of thousands, I don't think we even know the real number, of service people who've come back to this country with wounds that they will carry for the rest of their lives. That's another part of the horror of this war. There also, of course, is the economic horror of this war. Not only the economic devastation brought to the people of Iraq and the complete undermining of the infrastructure of Iraq and what that means for people's livelihood, their jobs, the social service networks, everything else. But what is the economic impact of this war for us here at home? There's a lot of ways that the news reports on the money related to this. It's hard to get an exact figure, but at least $300 billion have already been spent. I can't even imagine $300 billion. I mean, that is a tremendous amount of money. And according to the New York Times, our paper, the favorite paper of record, on Friday, the United States Senate, in their wisdom, I guess, passed a bill, an additional $63 billion. And it looks like another $7 billion might get added onto that before this term is over. Billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars pouring into this war. And let me be very, very clear. They are pouring the money into the war and the occupation and the building of permanent military bases there. Even though Congress has voted against permanent military bases, they are building them now. The money is not going into reconstruction. Housing and schools and everything else that the Iraqi people need is not being built. Don't let them kid you. It's not going into reconstruction. It's going into war and occupation. And, of course, the pockets of Halliburton and folks like that. So, and, you know, again, I'm sure I don't need to do this with this group, but let's just think for a moment what that money could have been used for these past few years in this country. How many schools could have been built right in our own neighborhoods? How many young people could have gotten a college education in these 4 years? How many people could have received the health care that they deserve? How much further along could we have been in the fight against HIV and AIDS and breast cancer and the other diseases that are wiping out our communities? How many job training programs could have been created? You get it. It goes on and on and on. We know what the money could have been used for. This war is devastating our economy just as it is devastating the Iraqi economy. The other thing, though, that this war has been doing is pulling people who have been in the reserves and in the National Guard, who often serve in first responder jobs, right? Firefighters, police, EMT workers, pulling them off of those jobs and sending them off to Iraq. Perhaps the most dramatic example of this, of course, was what happened in Katrina last year in New Orleans, where 3,000 Louisiana National Guards people, 3,000 people were not there to help in rescue operations. They were in Iraq. To say nothing of the boats and the helicopters and the other equipment that really should have been there to help rescue people and save those lives. So we get the idea. So we get the idea about what's wrong, right? But let me say one other thing to sort of place this in a bigger context. We have to understand this war in the terms that the Bush administration keeps putting it out there. That is in the context of their so-called war on terror. They say that over and over again as if it's going to make it true. That we are in Iraq to stop the terrorists so we don't have to fight them here at home. That's what he keeps saying. That's what Bush keeps saying. Well, this war on terror serves them well as an ideological framework, but otherwise it is a complete failure. Remember their war on drugs, right? Remember their war on poverty? Well, these, if I might say so, these assholes, these assholes who seem to rely over and over again on military solutions and militarism don't really know how to fight a war on poverty or a war on drugs or to do anything about terrorism. In fact, The war in Iraq has not made the Iraqi people or the people of this country or people anywhere in the world any safer than we were 5 years ago. This war on terror is also the same excuse that they use to justify the assault here at home on all of our rights, from our basic civil liberties, our basic civil rights, all of the rights of working people, of communities of color, of women, of the LGBT communities. All the rights that we have struggled for are under assault today, again, often couched in this broad ideological framework of the war on terror. Let me just a little footnote here. You should never forget for 1 minute that first Patriot Act, which was passed within weeks of 9/11, right, has more than 600 pages, right, of legislation undermining everybody's civil liberties. Who in Congress actually read those 600 pages before they voted on it? That document had to have been written before 9/11 happened, that used 9/11 to ram that through, that used 9/11 to justify every single thing they have done since then. And let me just say, we are 2 days away from the 5th anniversary of 9/11. And we have to, out of our own humanity, we have to honor and remember and take a moment to reflect on what happened on that day and honor the lives that were lost that day. But we also, as we do that, have to be honest with ourselves and with the people that we interact with every day, to say out loud, we have to not be afraid to say that this Bush administration used the horror of 9/11 to push through their own agenda. And the horror of 9/11 has been repeated day in and day out in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in many parts of the world with our tax dollars and in our name, and we cannot let that happen. We must stop them. Let me say a few more things because I know my time is starting to run out. As bad as the war is, and then that's enough of a reason to stop it. I also want to say that we have got to stop this war because the fact of this war makes it impossible for us to move forward on any other parts of our progressive agenda. The fact of this war stops the forward motion on a whole host of other issues. Until this war is over, we will not make significant progress on any one of our issues. If we are going to turn this country around, then ending the war in Iraq and bringing all of our troops home is the first step in that process. So what do we do? What do we do? What do we do to end this war? First and foremost, we have got to make it possible for all of the anti-war sentiment that exists in every community in this country to be heard, to be visible. There are many, many more people who are opposed to this war than who are actually doing something to end the war. We have got to turn anti-war sentiment into anti-war activism. And we do that wherever we are. No, we cannot stop working on the other issues. I am not going to sit here today and urge you to stop working on all the other struggles you're involved in. What I am going to urge you to do is to take up the anti-war work in those struggles, in those movements. So we build a movement that actually really reflects all of the communities and all the struggles that our people face. We need to connect the struggle against the war in Iraq and the occupation in Iraq to all the other struggles. And let me say very quickly here, let me just throw it in. The struggle that has unfolded in the last several weeks and last several months in terms of what Israel has done in Gaza and in Lebanon is something that we can no longer ignore. The anti-war movement in this country has been too silent on specifically on the role of the U.S. government in providing the resources for Israel to carry out its occupation in the West Bank and in Gaza, and then most recently to carry out this insane cruel, barbaric war in Lebanon for a month. So we need to make those connections. They are real connections. And then finally, there are 3 areas of work that we need to do. We need to stop and do whatever we can to stop the flow of our young people into the United States military. We need to support the counter-recruitment work that is going on campuses and in high schools all around this country. We need to support the very brave and courageous resistors that are standing up and saying, no, they're not going to fight. They're not going to follow these orders. We need to say out loud that no more of our young people should go into the military. Of course, if they do go in, then forget this, don't tell, don't ask, don't tell policy. But really, we have to support the resistors and the counter-recruitment work. We have to put the pressure on. We have to escalate the pressure on Congress to stop the flow of money. It's enough. It's more than enough. It's way too much money. And the United States Congress, again, in this vote that I just told you about that the Senate had on Thursday, $63 billion, the vote was 98-0. That means no Democrat voted against that money, right? So everybody in Congress must be held responsible. They can not only take a stand, they can take action. They can end this war. And we have a particular opportunity in these next few months with the congressional midterm elections coming up to put pressure not only on every incumbent, but everybody who's running for Congress to make this truly a referendum on the war. We have an opportunity to bird dog every candidate, to collect signatures on a Voters for Peace pledge, to take action, militant, nonviolent civil disobedience action during the Declaration of Peace Week, the last week in September. All this information, by the way, is on our website, unitedforpeace.org. That's unitedforpeace.org. There are many, many ways we can do this, but whatever the outcome of the November 7th election is, and we hope more anti-war people end up going to Congress, whatever it is, though, whatever the outcome is, we need to keep the heat on Congress. No honeymoon, right? No honeymoon period. We hit the streets on November 8th telling the new Congress that they have to end the war. And then finally, as I said before, we need to play a role in making sure that there are, in every arena of our lives, people are speaking out. We need to pass resolutions. We need to write letters to the editor. We need to picket and protest at media outlets when they don't cover anti-war activism. We need to protest by having vigils and marches and civil disobedience. We need to find new ways for people to express their opposition to the war, and we need to be crystal clear. The war needs to end. The war needs to end now, and all of our troops need to come home. That means no permanent bases left in Iraq. And finally, we want some of our tax dollars used for creative purposes. Let's really help in the rebuilding of Iraq by giving money and resources to the Iraqi people, not to Halliburton, to rebuild their own country. So I want to thank you again for all your hard work on this issue. Thank you.